After getting a waiver approved for a seventh college basketball season, Skylar Wicks could be Gonzaga's X factor this upcoming season.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton. Over a month after Skylar Wicks committed to Gonzaga out of the transfer portal, he has found out that he is eligible through the NCAA for the upcoming 26-27 season. And that's what we're going to talk about. A reminder on who Skylar Wicks is. We talked about him when he first committed, but kind of a lot of silence on that regard since then because we weren't sure that he was going to get eligible. And of course, Gonzaga then lost Mario and landed Wiggins and landed Bennett, and all sorts of craziness has happened, which is what we're going to also talk about later in the show as we evaluate what does Wicks's role look like now, because it doesn't look the same as what we thought it would be in late June when he first made his commitment public to Gonzaga. And then we're going to close out the show talking about what's next. There's three outstanding NCAA eligibility concerns on Gonzaga's roster. One of them has now been settled with Wicks. What does that mean for the other two, and Nathan Sousa and Izan Almansa? We'll get to that to close out the show. But first, let's talk about Skylar Wicks. He committed to Gonzaga again in late June. I think it was June 30th. It was right before the Gonzaga officially moved into the new look Pac-12. There was like a flurry of Gonzaga news-related things right around the start of July. He comes from St. Francis University, where he spent his last year, although he has been at multiple different stops throughout his college career. We'll get to that momentarily, but he was pursued by a handful of different schools, high profile, high major programs out of the transfer portal. Obviously, he was still going for that waiver, so I think his transfer portal market was a little bit dulled for teams who were maybe not as willing to take on the risk of adding a player who they knew at best would find out he was eligible around now in August. But Gonzaga was willing to take that risk. Rutgers pursued him. They had him on campus for a visit. BYU pursued him. UNLV, Florida Atlantic, coached by former Gonzaga Director of Ops John Jackas. Some of the schools that were interested in landing Skylar Wicks, again, out of St. Francis. Waiver finally comes through now on August 4th is when it was officially approved. It was announced by Deshaun London of 247 Sports on August 10th is how we got the confirmation. Wicks is 6'6", 26-year-old guard from Jersey City, New Jersey. And to clarify here, I just want to point this out. Because Wicks couldn't sign any paperwork with Gonzaga, he could not make his commitment anything more than just a commitment to Gonzaga. Now that he is eligible, he is free to sign paperwork and officially enroll in classes and be on the roster and all of that stuff. But that hasn't happened. And we're recording this just like less than 12 hours after this news became live. So obviously it could still happen and probably will still happen. But I just want to point out that, like, as of this specific recording, he's not officially on Gonzaga's roster, but we don't expect. Everything that I have heard is that he is planning to sign his paperwork and be a Gonzaga Bulldog this upcoming season. Last year was the big breakout season for Skylar Wicks. Again, he was been all over the place. He started his career at Missouri State in the Missouri Valley Conference way back in the 2020-21 season. That was the COVID season. That was the year Gonzaga had Jalen Suggs and went to the national championship game. He only played 6 games that year, and it was COVID. The next year he redshirted. The next year he played at a junior college level. Then he played at Incarnate Word, Division I school, in the 23-24 season there in the Southland Conference. He was very good for them, averaged about 14 points. That was kind of his first breakout season. After that, he transferred to UT San Antonio, but only played 10 games that year. And I believe that is what he was applying for a waiver for specifically, was to get that year to not count against his eligibility. There were some extenuating circumstances there that I'm not going to get into. If he ever wants to have that revealed, great. But I believe that is where that waiver was kind of the stickiness of the waiver. And if that presumably did get approved to have that season wiped out for him, that is why he has this extra year of eligibility. After that year at UTSA, where he played just 10 games, he transfers to St. Francis in the NEC, one of the weaker conferences in college basketball, and that is a significant caveat with evaluating his performance. He was the best player on a bad team in a bad conference, primarily playing bad opponents. However, he did have some good games against high-profile opponents, which we'll talk about. All told, he played 28 games last year for St. Francis, started all of them, played 33 minutes a game, averaged 17.8 points per game. That was second in the NEC in scoring. He also averaged nearly 7 rebounds, 3 assists, and 1.5 steals per game. He wasn't the most efficient scorer, about 44% on twos. That was on about 10 attempts per game, though. He was the engine for St. Francis offensively. He had to do a little bit of everything for that team. And he did shoot it pretty well from three, 36% from three on 6 attempts. That's a high volume and a high level of efficiency. And again, it's something I talk about a lot. He was the focal point of opposing defenses, the best defensive player in pretty much every single game that Skylar Wicks played last year was guarding him, and he still managed to shoot 6 threes a game and bang them at a 36% clip. That is a promising sign. Now, I will fully admit that the rest of his three-point shooting in his career has been spotty. Now he's had a lot of partial seasons, and it's, he shot well at the JUCO level, but how much does that translate? It is a fair question to wonder how well of a three-point shooter he can be at Gonzaga. But in his most recent season on a high volume, he did shoot well, and I think that does matter. He also shot 72.5% from the free throw line on about 4 attempts per game. He was second in the NEC in scoring. He was 6th in steals and rebounding. He was 12th in assists. He was all NEC third team, would have been higher had the team been a little bit better. But again, like a lot of teams in the NEC, St. Francis played a lot of road games against high major opponents. And while they did not win those games, Skylar Wicks played pretty well in those games. A couple highlights. He had 20 points in the game at Oklahoma out of the SEC. He had 18 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists, and a pair of steals in a road game at TCU in the Big 12. He had 18 points, 8 rebounds, and 6 assists. That's a really nice game. That was at Xavier in the Big East. And then against one of the best teams in the country last year, a team that was number 1 for periods of time, Florida in Gainesville, Skylar Wicks had 22 points, 3 rebounds, and 3 steals. In previous stops and at Carnet Word, they played a handful of high major opponents, and Wicks played well in those games. He has historically, throughout his career, when playing on the road against a power conference team, his performance has ticked up. And obviously the sample size is not very big, and certainly the role that he had at St. Francis is different than the role he'll have at Gonzaga when they play Purdue and Michigan State and Duke and LSU and Creighton and all of those different teams. But still, it's, I think, an important note that he has played well and shot it well in those specific matchups. So what does this 26-year-old, 6'6", high-scoring wing who does not get to campus until August, what does he bring to Gonzaga's wing rotation that was pretty barren until about a week ago when they make 2 roster additions? What are the changes with Wiggins and Bennett? What do they mean to Skylar Wicks' potential role? And what specifically are the tangible skills that he is bringing to Mark Few's team this upcoming season? We're going to get into all of that coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, running a business shouldn't feel like you're trying to connect a bunch of systems that just weren't ever designed to work together. You got an app for accounting, you got another app for inventory, and another for sales, and somehow none of them know how to talk to each other. And that's where Odoo comes in. Odoo is an all-in-one business management software that brings every part of your business together in one powerful platform. From sales and accounting to inventory and marketing, everything works in one place. It helps your team move faster, stay more organized, and focused on growing the business instead of spending their time managing software. Because the best organizations, they know that success isn't just about talent, it's about having everybody working toward the same goal. And that's true in sports, just like it's true in business. One thing that really stands out is that when you get an organization that has everybody pulling in the same direction, again, we saw this with Gonzaga. They went 31-4 last year with a roster full of players from all over the place. It wasn't just one great player. It wasn't just Mark Few. It was a coordinated effort across the organization that made them successful. Great organizations, they win because operations matter. And that's why you should get Odoo. Try for free today at odoo.com/lockedon. That's odoo.com/lockedon. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast, still talking about Gonzaga's quote-unquote addition of 6'6" wing Skylar Wicks. We say quote-unquote because he committed to the program over a month ago. He committed to the program technically on their last day of being members of the West Coast Conference, as it was the last day of June before the team officially moved into the new look Pac-12. So he's been known to be a Zag for over a month, close to a month and a half at this point. But again, his eligibility was a big question mark. And because he had played 6 different years, because he's looking for what it will literally be his 7th season as a member of a college basketball team, most people thought his eligibility was not going to be granted. Now, I think the staff would not go after a player who had absolutely no chance of getting a waiver approved. So it seemed a little silly to just write him off completely. Yet many people did just assume, there's no way he's going to be eligible, when in fact he was fighting for this eligibility and has had it granted as of August 4th and is now going to be on this Gonzaga roster this upcoming season. So what does he bring? Well, he's a big guard. He's 6'6". He was, again, the engine for St. Francis. He handled the ball primarily for them last year. He's not going to be asked to do that at Gonzaga. He's not really a point guard. He just happened to be the best player on his team last year, so they put the ball in his hands as often as they possibly could. But Gonzaga did not recruit him to be a point guard. It is a bonus that he can handle the basketball. I think for those of you who saw this yesterday, kind of as the Skylar Wicks news was coming out, Theo Lawson, the spokesman review, had done an interview with Chauncey Wiggins and was talking to Wiggins about kind of his, arrival on campus and getting to play for Gonzaga. And one of the things that he said was that Coach RJ Barr told him that basically they're going to play him at the 2, the 3, the 4. It's going to be a lot of positions. You get the ball in transition, you can get the team into their offense. You got to know how to do that. And it kind of lends it to the idea of marinating on, depending on how the rest of the roster comes together, that Gonzaga's going to play even more positionless this upcoming season. Certainly it depends what happens at the point guard position. If they get a Lee or a Dent, and that's a pretty pure point guard type player, I think that the half court sets will run through said player. But I also think you're going to see a lot of players who can kind of capably handle the ball, like Davis Fogel, like Skylar Wicks now, like Chauncey Wiggins, like Isaiah Harwell. Like, they're going to have a lot of different options to do that. And Wicks, one of the things that he brings to this team is the size to play the 2 or the 3 pretty comfortably, and to be an off-ball player who relocates, who shoots open threes, who attacks closeouts, who does that, but who also can handle the ball and run the pick and roll and get you into offensive sets and kind of be a de facto combo guard for this roster. The biggest thing for Skylar Wicks is his scoring. Again, 36% from 3 last year. He attacks the rim quite effectively. He loves to drive. He loves to get into the paint. He's got enough size and physicality that he's not just going to get bullied and bodied in the Pac-12 when he attempts to do that. Again, he scored a lot of points against Florida's front court and Oklahoma's front court and Xavier last year in TCU. So he's proven he can do that at that level. He's good at getting to the free throw line, not an elite free throw shooter, but capable enough that you're going to feel confident when he's drawing contact and getting to the stripe. He's also just an older player with a lot of experience. Again, prior to last week, before Gonzaga landed Javon, Bennett, and Chauncey Wiggins, they had exactly 0.0 minutes played on their bench this upcoming season. Nobody with any college basketball experience. Parker Jefferson had been on the team, but he had not played. Funches and Foster and Akanga Howe were true freshmen. Even if they get Almansa and Sousa, who we'll talk about in the final segment, they have not played college basketball either. So the team was really lacking experience. And now you add Wiggins, who's probably going to start, and that probably pushes Isaiah Harwell to the bench, who's somebody who has experience in the Big 12. Javon Bennett is currently penciled in to start, but will likely end up on the bench if Gonzaga lands another point guard. So that gives you a ton of experience there. And now you have Skylar Wicks, who, for the record, this is about to be his 7th season of college basketball. He's played 74 Division I games. That's not that many. That's less than Braden Huff, who's played 3.5 seasons. Like, that's less than a lot. I mean, Javon Bennett has played like 135 games, like way more than Skylar Wicks. The injuries and redshirt and all of that has played a role, but still, Skylar Wicks provides 74 games of Division I basketball experience onto a bench unit that, again, a week ago did not have a single game of experience. He's also a very good rebounder for his size. That's something Gonzaga has always loved in their guards. They love guards who can grab a rebound and get out. They loved Joel Ayayi for this. That's what they had so much appeal for Michael Ajayi, who was a great rebounder. He didn't quite find the rest of the role in his 1 year in Spokane, but that was part of what they liked about him. He played a little bit more at the 4, but he was a 3 who could rebound. They've played lineups where Ben Gregg or Anton Watson was playing the 3. Those are great rebounding wings as well. Chauncey Wiggins is not a great rebounder, but he's going to play some at the 3 this year. I think Wicks helps give you some more perimeter rebounding. Davis Vogel's a good rebounder for his position. He got a lot better at it last year. One of the things he improved the most on from November to March of last season was positional rebounding. Isaiah Harwell, it depends how much he recovers from that injury that derailed him at times last year, but he's an explosive enough athlete that I think you project he can be a good rebounder for his position as well. Wicks also gives you somebody who averaged nearly 7 rebounds per game. And yes, that more than I think even the scoring, the rebounding should be taken with a grain of salt, playing in a conference that did not have the size and physicality that you're going to see in the Pac-12 for Gonzaga. But he is still proven to be a quality rebounder for his position. Now, again, he's not much of a playmaker. I think if you teach him the offense, obviously, if you have situations where he's running off screens, you expect that he can make those reads and do that. But you're not asking him to break down defenses. You're not asking him to be the primary operator with the ball in his hands. But he is a capable connective wing. He is a capable ball mover, which is a phrase they like to use about Emmanuel Inocente of like, we're not asking you to create it all. We're just asking you to keep the ball moving and keep the offense going. I think Wicks is more than capable of being that. I think of him a little bit of kind of a poor man's Tyon Grant Foster. I don't love that term, but I think that is a good way to think about him as somebody who's the size of a wing, but who can handle the ball like a point guard, who's used to being the guy in their offensive set, who attacks off the dribble a lot, and who, whose biggest kind of X factor for the team in terms of like whether they hit their ceiling or their floor is how they adjust to being in a much different role in this system. I think that's a lot of why Skylar Wicks kind of compares to Tyon Grant Foster. Now, one very, very key difference between the two of them, like a massive difference, is on the defensive end of the floor. Tyon Grant Foster was an excellent defensive player. Him and Jalen Worley created a lethal perimeter defense, and Emmanuel Inocente for that matter, for Gonzaga last year. Skylar Wicks, by all accounts, is not a good defensive player. And I think the biggest thing that will determine whether he ends up on the floor in a significant role or not is how he does on that end of the floor. Using team defense metrics is not a perfectly reliable way to look at a player's defense. Skylar Wicks, for his career, according to advanced metrics like defensive box plus minus and defensive win shares and other stats like that, has graded out as a below average defensive player. St. Francis last year, according to Ken Palm's adjusted defensive efficiency, was 357th out of 365 teams. They were the 8th worst defensive team in the country, and Skylar Wicks played more minutes on that team than anybody else. That is not a direct correlation, but it is also not that hard to come to the conclusion that that is an area he needs to improve. If Skylar Wicks was as good of a defender as Jalen Worley or Tyon Grant Foster, and he played 33 minutes a game, that team probably wouldn't have been the 8th worst defensive team in the country. The rest of their team would have had to be horrific on that end of the floor. And they may have been, don't get me wrong, but I'm not expecting Skylar Wicks to be a player who locks down on the perimeter. I think your best case scenario for Gonzaga is that he is average, that he holds his own on that end of the floor. And if he does not, he will not play. I mean, it is that simple. Gonzaga desperately needed three-point shooting last year, and they benched Steele Venters down the stretch because he could not hold his own defensively. Mark Few will not tolerate bad defense on the perimeter. They have more help in the sense that if you are a bad defender on the perimeter, you have Masamba Diop waiting for you down on the block. But the perimeter defense is not as strong on this team because you lose Inocente and Grant Foster and Worley. And while I think Isaiah Harwell is a good addition there, I think Vogel will be better. Wiggins is okay, but not great. Bennett's undersized. It's part of why I think Xavion Lee might be a really good addition if that's who the Zags end up landing, because he is a strong point guard defender at this level. But Wicks is not bringing that. And I think that's a huge factor in terms of how much playing time he ends up getting for this team. So what I want to do now is take a look at where does he actually fit in. Mark Few plays 8 guys, 9 guys, maybe. Is Skylar Wicks one of those 9 guys? Is he end up as part of this rotation? We're going to get into that and what's next for Gonzaga to close out the show coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, when workplace chaos hits and you need the right hire, Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps connect employers with candidates who match specific needs like skills and certifications and location, so less time gets spent searching and more time gets spent finding the right fit. People are finding quality hires on Indeed right now. In fact, in the minute that I've been talking to you, companies like yours have made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed's worldwide data. So whether it's deadlines piling up too much on one person's plate or trying to scale something quickly, the right person can completely change how your team operates. And that's why getting in front of a qualified candidate matters. So spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all of your boxes. It's less stressful, it takes less time, and you get more results. So when you need the right person to cut through the chaos, that's a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support Locked On Zags by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? That's a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Folks, before this season even tips off, everybody is making their predictions. Who's going to win the Pac-12? Who's going to make the big dance? Who's going to lift the trophy at the end of the season? And on Kalshi, America's #1 prediction market platform, you can trade those predictions in a live market. For Gonzaga right now, you can trade wins. Whether you think you're 15 or more wins, 18 or more, 21, 24, 27. Let's do 24 or more wins. Feels pretty plausible for this team. Now a $100 trade would pay you $80. On Kalshi, you're trading against peers in a live market. That means there's no house. And as the probability changes, you can buy in and out of your position. So trade the draft pick, trade the game, and more on Kalshi. Download the Kalshi app and use code LOCKEDON to get $500 in bonus credits when you trade $25. That's Kalshi, Kalshi. Trade on anything. 18 plus only. Restrictions and eligibility requirements apply. Event contract trading involves risk and may not be suitable for all investors. Kalshi products are not available in all jurisdictions. Prices, values, and available markets may differ from those mentioned. For more information, see Kalshi.com/regulatory. All right, folks, segment 3, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast. Closing out the show, continuing our conversation about Gonzaga's newest, in quotation marks, player, Skylar Wicks. Skylar Wicks, who committed to Gonzaga back in late June, had his eligibility waiver approved on August 4th, and it was announced publicly on August 10th. Now we assume, barring any late changes to the minds of Skylar Wicks or Gonzaga's coaching staff, we expect that he is going to sign his paperwork and officially arrive in Spokane to be part of the roster in the 26-27 season. We talked about his history, this being his 7th season of college basketball, his performance last year at St. Francis, and a little bit about what he brings to this team as a jumbo guard, as somebody who's initiated before, who can shoot the rock, who can get downhill. We talked about the concerns about what he brings on the other end of the floor. And now it's simple. Does he crack Gonzaga's rotation? Every single year, and for most of this offseason, it hasn't been a conversation, but every year we inevitably have this conversation. How on earth is Mark Few and Gonzaga going to condense the rotation? Every year, it seems like people are like, there's 10, 11 guys who are going to play. Mark Few's not going to play an 8-man or a 9-man rotation. And every year he inevitably does. Last year was about as close to having an extended rotation as possible. And that's partly because they really, nobody played more than 30 minutes a game until Braden Huff's injury. At that point, then Worley was dealing with injuries and like Fogel pushed his way into the rotation. Like it was kind of wonky last year. And still it was like 10-ish. Like more like 9, really. It was just like they added somebody to the rotation when Huff got hurt. So this year, let's assume 9 is kind of the max. And again, we say rotation doesn't mean that like players 10 through 15 won't play a single minute. It just means that they'll be primarily in garbage time or only part of the rotation in certain games or whatever it may be. On my mind right now, looking at the roster, there are 6 locks for rotation spots. Masamba Diop, Braden Huff, Chauncey Wiggins, Davis Fogel, Javon Bennett, Isaiah Harwell. Those 5 players are all, or 6 players are all competing to start. As of right, if the season started tomorrow, 5 of those players would start. I expect it would be Diop, Huff, Fogel, Wiggins, Bennett, and Harwell coming off the bench, but the season's not starting tomorrow. And there will be at least one more roster addition. It is likely going to be a point guard. The 2 main targets that have been discussed are Donovan Dent and Xavion Lee from Florida. We have talked about Trey Holloman from NC State, BJ Edwards from SMU, Sky Clark, Aiden Mahaney, a couple other names that have been brought up in the past as well. But Gonzaga will get another point guard, and that player will be part of the rotation. So that's effectively 7 players in Gonzaga's rotation that are locks. After that, you have Izan Almansa, who is a lock if he is eligible. We just are still waiting to find out if he is going to be eligible. You also have Nathan Sousa. Now, I'm not sure what's going to happen with Nathan Sousa. If Gonzaga gets another point guard, like let's say Zavion Lee, and you have Zavion Lee and Javon Bennett, is Nathan Sousa going to spend his only year of college basketball eligibility as the third string point guard? Something tells me he probably will not. And I say something, I want to be clear, that is an instinct. That is not a actual me reporting anything. Just not sure that he would make the trip from France to Spokane if he was going to be the third string point guard. So that's something to keep on your radar. But regardless, 7 players in the rotation, 8 if Izan Almansa is eligible. That means you have Skylar Wicks, Luca Foster, Juwan Akanga-Ahawa, Parker Jefferson, and Sam Funches effectively competing for that last rotation spot. I think ultimately it comes down to Skylar Wicks and Luca Foster. I don't think Akanga-Ahawa is going to beat out either of those guys. They all play the same position. Akanga-Ahawa is very raw. I think he's somebody who you kind of expect to be more on the Rui Hachimura path, where you play very little as a freshman and then you steadily improve your playing time until you're ready to be a big-time contributor. Luca Foster is a true freshman, but he has been impressive this summer. He's a good shooter. He's a very good athlete. He's got a 6'9" wingspan. I think that the competition between Foster and Wicks is going to be intense. Like, I think those two guys are going to fight it out for that 9th rotation spot. If Izan Almansa ends up not getting eligible, a couple things happen. One, I think Parker Jefferson climbs into a bigger role for playing time, but I also think Chauncey Wiggins ends up playing more time at the 4, which means one of Wicks or Foster is a bit more likely to be in the rotation. It probably benefits both of them from a playing time perspective if Almansa ends up not getting eligible. Gonzaga could also go out and get somebody to replace Izan Almansa, another big potentially, in which case we'd kind of be back where we are right now in terms of playing time. So what I said in the second segment stands true. If Skylar Wicks does not prove capable to play good enough perimeter defense, and Luca Foster does, which freshmen tend to struggle on that end of the floor, but if Foster is a better shooter and or a better defender than Skylar Wicks, he will beat him out for playing time, and Wicks will be number 10 in the rotation. Again, that doesn't mean he won't play at all, but it means that the playing time will be somewhat sporadic for him. If Wicks ends up, because he's stronger, because he's bigger, because he has more experience, if he ends up proving capable as a defender and is shooting the ball well and kind of initiating the offense at times, he will beat out Luca Foster for playing time. Mark Few tends to value experience over freshmen, but in this case, Foster will have spent more time in Gonzaga's system than Skylar Wicks will, and I think that will kind of even out that difference. Look for that to be a pretty significant battle for a rotation spot this upcoming season. What's next for Gonzaga? Well, again, Nathan Sousa is probably the most interesting potential addition for Gonzaga at this point. Does he end up coming? Does he get cleared by the NCAA? By all accounts, he should. The new 5-and-5 rules going into effect indicate that he should have 1 year of eligibility. The clock starts 5 years after your 19th birthday. This 26-27 season would be the 5th year after Nathan Sousa's 19th birthday. So he should be eligible. They're probably looking at his professional status, having played in France. He didn't play in the Euro League. He didn't play in Spain or the BBL. I think he should get eligible. I'm not sure why it's taking so long, other than the massive backlog of these eligibility cases the NCAA is working through. Almansa's case is far trickier. He played professionally for the G League Ignite. He was at NBA All-Star Weekend in 2024. Like, literally, he played in an All-Star exhibition game against Chet Holmgren and Jalen Williams. Like, it's a weird case. He also played professionally in Australia and professionally in Spain. There's a very real chance that Izan Almansa does not get eligible this upcoming season. Those are the two that are outstanding at this point. We know Wicks is cleared now. What about these other two? That's the biggest question mark still on Gonzaga's kind of offseason checklist, outside of adding a starting caliber point guard, which they're hoping to do again with either Zavion Lee or Donovan Dent. So right now, Gonzaga has 1 open roster spot if both the Sousa and Almansa are cleared. It's also again, greater than you'd expect chance that neither of those players are in Spokane next year, which would mean the Zags have 3 open roster spots. If they add a point guard, I think that probably kind of wipes out D'Souza's spot. So then you have 2 left. If Almansa makes it, you'd have 1 left. And I think at that point, if you have Zavion Lee and you have Izan Almansa, and now you have Skylar Wicks and you have 1 open roster spot, I suspect it probably wouldn't go to somebody who is like desperately vying for playing time, because again, Gonzaga's rotation would be full at that point. You'd have Masamba Diop and Braden Huff as your starting front court. You'd have Almansa as your third big. You'd have Jefferson and Funches as your backup bigs. On the wing, you'd have Chauncey, Wiggins, Davis, Fogel, Isaiah Harwell, Skylar Wicks, Luca Foster, Joanna Konga, Ahawa. And then at point guard, you'd have Xavion Lee, let's say, and Javon Bennett. Like that's a full, and then of course you'd have the two walk-ons in Alonzo Metz and Carter Nelson. You'd have one open roster spot. I think that would go to a walk-on type player. I think it might go to maybe a young international player if they can find somebody who wants to come over at the last minute. It wouldn't be maybe somebody who's still available in the transfer portal who just gives you some depth at a position. I mean, I think they wouldn't hate having a third string point guard. So if it's not Sousa, maybe you go out and get like I'll use him because I know he's in the portal, Miles Rice. I don't think Miles Rice is going to come to Gonzaga for that spot, but like you go get a third string point guard to kind of fill out your roster. But that's kind of where Gonzaga is at right now. Things are coming together. We're almost done. It's been a long offseason. I kind of thought that this week would be like when I was planning the offseason months ago, I thought, oh, the second week of August will be great. We won't have a lot of content to talk about, but at least we can talk about Mark Few going into the Hall of Fame that weekend. We'll just spend the whole week talking about Mark Few. Now I'm like hoping we're going to be able to talk about it on Friday's show, because we're jam-packed with Wicks and with Bennett and with Wiggins and with the pursuit of Lee and Dent and everything going on. It has been an unbelievably insane offseason. Trust me, I am not complaining about it. I'm excited to continue to bring you more information about this team as it comes together. That is going to wrap it up for me today here on the Locked On Zags podcast, though. We'll have more on Skylar Wicks, more on the rest of the roster, more on the updates for Almansa and Sousa as well. But again, folks, hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. And of course, as always, go Zags.